Enjoy your birthday.
Do it.
It's not bad here.
Oh, very God. Got a smaller crowd.
We're going to call the Arkansas Medical Marijuana Commission meeting to order Thursday, July 12th. It's 4:03 p.m. Provided to you is a copy of the minutes from the July 2nd meeting. These have been provided to you earlier. You can look at those to see if there are any recommended corrections or changes.
Commissioner Tillman, I have reviewed the minutes from July 2nd, 2018, and I would move that we approve the minutes as drafted.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the second item on the agenda is discussion of staffing for the Medical Marijuana Commission that we requested on the July 2nd, 2018 meeting. So we had asked several questions. You can refer back to the minutes, but I think Mary Robbins is going to address that for us.
Yes, so I did ask some questions about the possibility of separate staffing for the MMC, and where we are right now is that was not funded. There were some positions created in the event that the MMC was set apart, but MMC is under DFNA, and so the decision was made to duplicate those positions and put them in ABC. And those positions are staffed currently. So nothing could change in that regard until the general session, but if we can possibly have some conversations about what exactly you're looking for in terms of job duties and things like that, I think we are adequately staffed at ABC to handle that for you. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be. In the event we're not, we do have the potential to add, we have some open positions that could come back in at ABC, but they just aren't funded for MMC at this point. So it may be something that I think Dr. Tillman and Mr. Story, you guys specifically had some concerns, and if that's a conversation that we need to have about what our staff can do to better
So
cover
really,
some of those things.
my concern is what roles have changed at ABC. And then initially, you were our support, and now you're the director of
Right.
ABC, executive, is that correct?
Yeah, director.
Director of ABC. And so we just met Danny.
Right, so we have
And
Danny.
so I really didn't ever get a flow of, I met Danny on the phone, I didn't meet her as supporting the MMC. So just knowing, who is working with us and the staff that's working with us.
Sure. So, and just to kind of give you an idea, the positions that were duplicated from the MMC set out and put into ABC, we have one staff attorney position, and that is Danny's position. We have an administrative position, and that's Maggie Costley. And then we have a second administrative, and that is Brittany Vaughn. And so they kind of cross over with some ABC work. Danny is pretty much strictly marijuana, but anything you guys need, just let us know. I think we are adequately staffed to handle whatever may come up right now.
I think one of the things that I had looked to also is just who would be a point communications person, and was there a different voice as kind of the commission's voice versus ABC's voice, and to the point that there's not a lot of difference, but to the point there is any difference, how does the public understand that? How do we make those delineations and that may be a PR role more than a something else role.
Well, and so in that regard, you do have the chair, and then we do have a DFNA communications director. You all know Scott. And so if there's a message that needs to come from the chair through the commission, I think the appropriate avenue there would be for it to go to Scott, and it is strictly an MMC message and not
Okay.
an ABC message, if that's.
And that may very well take care of the matter. Some of that is, I think,
It's
at
just-
least I didn't understand. I didn't understand that was the process.
Gotcha.
So some of it's more of a, I'm not even sure that we're not staffed well. It's just understanding how do we make that work? And you know, some of that is we don't really get to communicate unless we're sitting here.
Right.
And
Right.
we had such a long, I mean, basically we met in December. We were meeting up until, you know, we kind of really November until we started getting applications, and then, you know, we're all on. I
Yeah,
felt
no
like I was
one
on
to
like
talk
an
to.
island.
Yeah.
We didn't really have a lot of communication with anybody, so it's kind of that how do we deal with that?
Sure, well,
Um,
and
So the clarification today helps. I
Good.
think it helps me a lot.
note, you can always contact me. I mean, I'm still here, obviously.
And we're very
then
grateful for that.
Danny is in the role basically that I would have been in when we were going through the rule promulgation
Yes.
process, and even more so because she is dedicated to medical marijuana
Mhm.
issues.
And we didn't know that, you know, I would always call you still, and
Yeah,
then-
and that's, you still
and-
can, that's fine, but Danny is there and available for you as well.
And I think even just since, you know, you and I had talked before we met last time, it's working now with Danny's a whole lot better. So I think a lot of that's kind of getting resolved anyway. Just being able to kind of, it's more for my edification than anything else.
Good deal. All right.
So, no further comments on that?
I don't know that I would have any at the moment. I mean, I think that helps clarify what I was trying to figure out at the time, at least.
So we will move further. Thank you for that clarification.
Good. I know the next item is your procurement, and we do have some people here from procurement. We've got David Withrow and Mary Catherine Williams, so I wanted to let you know that they are here for your next agenda item.
We need to recognize our legislative leaders in the audience.
Okay.
I did not,
Sorry.
please. Thank you. Yep. The next item is discussion of procurement procedures and timeline for selection and hiring of a consultant to assist MMC with scoring of dispensary applications. We had a lot of concerns at our last meeting trying to meet the timelines that have been set forth for the commission based on the past history.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Mary Catherine Williams. I'm lead counsel for the Office of State Procurement.
Ouch.
Thank you, Jake. And this is David Withrow. He is also of counsel for the Office of State Procurement. In looking at a tight timeline, we think that the best way to go about this would be something called cooperative purchasing, cooperative contracting. Now, what this is at base is sharing procurement contracts between governments, or sharing procurement contracts between public procurement units. And that can be something real small, like the city of Little Rock shares with the city of North Little Rock a contract, or it can be something larger where you go out of state, where an agency within Arkansas piggybacks essentially off of a contract that's already been researched, already been evaluated, already been checked.
Hey, ma'am, could you speak in the mic?
Sorry. It would be something that had already been researched, already been looked at quite closely. All of the frontline work that you have to do would already be done. And we could piggyback off a contract, a nationwide contract, and that way get you the expertise that you need within healthcare and management.
So when you say piggyback off a national contract,
Mhm.
meaning piggybacking off a contract that might be in Texas, or are you
Yes.
talking about always something that's associated with Arkansas?
No.
Because that brings in obvious.
No, it could be Texas, it could be Massachusetts, it could be Georgia. It would, we have several co-ops that are currently in place that have expertise with healthcare and management. We could look at what the scope of work is for your committee and look at what you need to accomplish, then take a look at those co-ops that we already have, that we've already evaluated, and that we've already decided meet the substantial requirements for Arkansas procurement law. And then in doing that, we can go ahead and send out that scope of work and ask for a request for quotes, bring it back, have it opened up, lowest bid wins. And that would shorten your time frame quite a bit.
When you say shorten the time frame, I don't
Sorry.
know what time frame we're even.
We'd be at 30 to 60 days.
From the rule change.
Yes.
And that would be to get what back? Somebody hired or somebody or
Your
like
lowest bid.
the lowest bid.
Yes.
And then from
You choose the lowest bid.
So we would then choose the person.
Mhm.
Would we choose the person or procurement choose the person?
Well, it would essentially be opening up the documentation from each bidder and saying this is the lowest
one.
the lowest one
And so the lowest one,
wins.
we get whatever that is.
Mhm.
Lowest one wins, and then so we'd be talking about our rule change amendment process that would get, and then from that we'd say 60 days ish, and then that would be for them to start,
Yes.
or us to award it, and then whatever that took to start would kind of be the timeline.
Yes.
And if we did it without the cooperative program, what kind of timeline would we be talking about?
Well, there are several different timelines you could be looking at. Something like an invitation for bid, which is also a lowest price evaluation, would also take a shorter period of time than something like a request for proposal, because with a request for proposal, we would have to start with evaluations. We would have to have demonstrations. We would have to go through all of the specs and technical expertise and all of that. It would take a significantly longer period of time at that point.
So in this group that you already have, they already have the technical expertise.
They've been
to-
pre-qualified, yes, ma'am.
Pre-qualified for reviewing applications for dispensaries.
Mhm.
How many of those groups are, if they're pre-qualified for reviewing dispensaries, do you know what states they're in?
Well, I'm sorry, I think I may have overstated that. They're pre-qualified as working in healthcare and health management. And we would send them a scope of work from working
Okay.
with your committee for what your committee needs. And you would be telling us what type of expertise you're looking for, what the work is that you want them to complete. And then those bidders who would be able to meet that scope of work would then send back all of their bids. So by the time you get their bids and know what amount of money they're working for, they're already saying, we can complete this work, and they've already been approved as being people that have worked in healthcare and health management.
And I guess the question that I would have is, do we want somebody who's just done healthcare, health management, or do we want something that's also added the element of dealing with medicinal marijuana
That
as
is
well?
something we can add to the scope of work, certainly.
And then the question would be, how many partnering states have that?
I would not know off the top of my head, but that is something that we can work with. That's what having the scope of work or statement of work would do for all of us, is gather up all the wording that we need for what type of experience you need, what type of expertise you need.
Because we would definitely want to keep the diversity in what we have with the commission as a part of reviewing these applications. I mean, because you could look and tell the diversity among all five of us. Yeah.
The other question that I have is, how do you prevent any conflicts of interest or any outside influences from, how can you vet that for these organizations that would apply or bid?
Well, when they originally go into the RFP that starts all of this with the other agency or other state that we would be piggybacking off of, they have to disclose whatever conflicts they have within industries and within hospital groups and all of that. When it gets to Arkansas, we have the Executive Order 9804, where they have to disclose within any contract work if they have any connections with people that work for the state employees, state legislators, all of that. So there will be the opportunity to take a look at their conflicts.
I think one of the concerns I have, you start talking about conflicts and bias, be it conscious, subconscious, doesn't really matter. One of the strengths of what we did here was there were 5 of us grading it. So even if, let's say you work for Vladimir Putin, right? And he's like, hey, you either get me a license or I'm going to blow plutonium in your face, and if you give me a license, I'll give you a bunch of rubles. The reality is you didn't have an ability to make that happen because you were only 20% of the vote. And simple mathematics says 20% never gets you the majority. So there was a natural mathematical check in the fact that all 5 of us graded these. So it didn't matter if your grandmother's application, it washed out with the math. Now, maybe your grandmother came in 50th instead of 40th. It became irrelevant who actually got the license. So there's a mathematical security in what we did. And that needs to be somehow be replicated, because if it was just one of us scoring these things and all these, fantastical lawsuits that we have been, then there might be some validity to that, right? But the fact is, none of us here determined who got a license. It was a group thing, and somehow that has to be replicated, in my opinion, or we're not doing justice, because you can sit here and say, well, this guy's above any suspicion. It just doesn't matter. When you do it with the way we did it, that becomes less relevant. So my concern is, you got one person doing it when the 5 of us did it?
Well, I ask a question or two. When we started this thing, we didn't know anything about marijuana. I didn't, and then we just learned the process. Are these people that you're looking at, and I'm assuming they're the big accounting firms that we'd be looking for, would they have, like, say, a financial expert? They do the financial stuff. They have, would they break it down that far? I mean, is it,
We can
or
ask
we
them
do
to.
know?
We can ask them to. That's what the scope of work or statement of work would be with. We would work with you
Okay.
in writing all that out, what you need, what expertise you're looking for. If you're looking for financial as well as someone with expertise specifically in marijuana dispensaries, as well as someone specifically who deals in healthcare management, and you want all of those people on the same team, we can put that in the scope of work.
Like somebody that knows something about growing, somebody that knows something about construction. So these accounting firms, we could put that in the scope that these people would have an expertise in this area.
Right, and they're mostly consulting firms, not necessarily accounting firms, but consulting firms.
Okay.
And yes, we can, that's what the statement of work is for, is to tell them, these are the items that we need to have your input on. This is the rubric of scoring that we want you to use. This is the amount of time we want you to have worked in this particular field. Those are all things that can be laid out in the scope of work.
There's another bias that concerns me, and particularly, we reviewed 86 applications. And I mean, you read these things and they got, the world's greatest consultant, this, that, and the other, and they were all the greatest of all time. But there is, as you go through them, there's a bias that develops. And I'm gonna use this analogy because what we were set out to do was do medical marijuana, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big difference if your bias is towards recreational versus medical. I'll give you one example I noticed as we went through these. But, in the medical world, we'll use the drug Sudafinil as an example. The company Pfizer, when they produced that drug, they didn't call it Turtle Wax. They didn't call it Johnsonville. They didn't call it Timberland. They called it Viagra, okay? And there's a big difference when you name something in a slang term versus a medical term. And when I looked through these things, quite frankly, I was appalled at Granddaddy's Candy and Charlotte's Web and Catatonic. I mean, there's a bias there that promotes, particularly for our adolescents. I mean, we did a great job with, we're not going to make it look like a piece of candy that your 4-year-old would eat. That's not the child I'm worried about. I'm worried about my 14, 18, 16-year-old, and I think there's a lot of people in Arkansas who have that same concern. As our adolescents, that's fine, recreation, medical, whatever, but I don't want my kid growing to be a pothead. And there were even some applications who even had doctors who said, well, it's a non-addictive substance. Well, no, it's not as addictive as IV heroin. But when you have biases like that, and trust me, I've seen the opiate industry with doctors telling you OxyContin was great for a sprained ankle. So we know what these professions do. They drive an industry into sales. And that's not what the people of Arkansas want. We don't want our kids on it. We don't want people driving around. So I'm real curious on what their bias is on marijuana as a public health issue. And that's something that has been completely not discussed. And some of these applications were quite frankly appalling. Just going to say that from a health standpoint. And so there's other biases that I'm not worried about Vladimir Putin so much as I'm worried about someone's 18 or 16-year-old kid being exposed to marijuana on a, particularly with the potency of what they make now. It's not even, this is not granddaddy's marijuana, right?
So I don't think,
So,
I think that's important when you'll look at the biases of the individuals, that if the commission chooses to go to you call it a corporate group to evaluate
Co-op.
the application? What did you call it?
Consulting.
Like
A consulting
the co-op.
group,
Isn't that
yeah.
what you were talking
A
about?
co-op.
Co-op.
Yes.
Because
Cooperative
that's
group.
through the
Yeah.
states.
Yes, it would be where we could piggyback off of another government contract that has already been vetted, where they've already researched. It would save us man hours or person hours. It would save us money. It would speed up your time frame where you could get this done within 30 to 60 days.
And we could ask them to have 5 different individuals scoring the rubric that we provide.
Yes, you can ask for them. You know, the question will be, you know, what the bid comes in at that point. But we can write it to make sure that we cover your, what you think the needs are in terms of expertise, experience, how many people are on there. Absolutely.
And do we have I hear even what the commission's saying and what I have in my mind of what that would be. And really, I'm sitting here and I'm honestly asking myself, because I tried to go find some other states who were trying to do consultants to do this. And I
It's
didn't
not-
really
right.
see any, and maybe I missed it, and if somebody's got a better idea, I'm sure they'll
I
let me
did.
know.
I didn't see.
I didn't find any. So my question is, what do we do if we go through this whole process? We as a group don't start scoring them. We wait. We go back and we send out this great RFP and we get a goose egg. We don't get anything that comes back, or we get one group that's astronomical, and then we're sitting here going, that's not worth it. That's not whatever. For whatever reason, we don't go that way. We've wasted a lot of time. That's a concern I have,
Sure.
and I don't know
If
how to
the
address
committee-
that.
If the committee wants to score, that is absolutely fine. No one's saying that we shouldn't. We were just brought over to answer
Yes.
questions about the time.
Sure.
and
This is
the
a
procedure.
Yeah, this
discussion
is
with us, too.
discussion with us. Yes,
Oh,
thank
okay.
you.
It's
Yeah, we're not
necessarily
targeting
directed at
you.
you. Sorry, I
This
didn't
is-
mean that.
We don't get to talk.
Yeah, we don't get
I mean,
to
we
talk.
don't- we don't
So
get
We're
to
not
talk.
used to talking to each
Yeah.
other. We're afraid
Yeah.
to talk to
I mean,
each other,
we
so
don't
we're
get
like
to talk
talking to
about
you. No.
These things we just went
Yeah.
through and be able to say, hey, what did you think about some of the ones that came up? I mean, I know you guys saw some of the names they're calling it. I'm sorry, that's not medical. And there
So-
were some guys that did a great job, avoiding
But the
those
focus
types
of what
things.
we're trying to is weigh the benefit of bringing in a consulting group so that we could stay on time with the rules that have been set forth. So that's why you're here, and we wanted to know what was the benefit of that, what was available, and what's the process of that, so that the commission can make a decision on that.
Well,
And
the
what-
benefit of it would be having a step in between you and the decision, essentially.
Okay, so one benefit is that you would,
That there would be-
procurement would,
Well, that there would be another person between this committee and the decision in terms of scoring. So you could have someone else doing the scoring if the committee wants that.
so we would have this consultant score
Mhm.
all of the 200, is it 283?
203.
203 remaining or dispensary that they would review,
Yes. Using
do the score, they would provide them to the procurement
They would,
office.
we could ask whoever is chosen through the procurement process, we could ask them to go ahead and use the rubric, I believe it's already been set
Right.
up
Right, that we set
for
up.
scoring,
Yes.
yes. And then that person would give you the results.
And so then we as a commission just wait on them to say, here's your scores, and then, or does it go directly to ABC, the scores, and then we just, what would be the role of the commission?
That would be something that we would have to work out.
Yeah, because that's
I-
where I'm
I
not.
think that's something-
Well, it says here in the proposed rule, and we talked about it last time, was that the findings of any consultant should not be final and binding unless approved by the commission.
But, I mean, we wouldn't have reviewed them, so how are we gonna even make any assessment of them? I mean, you tell me, here's 203 scores, I'm not gonna go and read all 203 of those applications if I'm not.
If
you
we're gonna
see,
do that, we might as well just do it.
We may as well
We have to do it
review
anyhow.
them. I'm going to have to accept what someone else is, an expert or consultant that we have chosen as is. Or it's gonna go
Well, we
to
have to
ABC, and then, I'm just asking where, maybe you can help us, Danny, with.
Well, with regard to the question of, does it go to ABC or does it would come before the commission for the commission to review and adopt. To what extent you wanted to review, that would be up to you, honestly. But it would, MMC would have the sole authority to adopt those findings. Other than that, ABC might hold the results, I guess.
So if it didn't have the right name, then, of course, Commissioner Ramon may say it's named Daddy Dog. I'm not gonna accept that. You know, I'm just saying that it's very tricky, so.
The advantages sound, I mean, to me, there's a pros and cons.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tremendous amount of work, and we've been put so far behind because of all the things that have gone on. I mean, so from a time standpoint, and it sounds like the cooperative procurement is the quickest way there. So that sounds like if the purpose of this is to get it done as quickly as possible, because I think the state of Arkansas is tired of waiting, I think that's a major plus, but I think that also steers us to, if we're not gonna do the cooperative person, we might as well do it ourselves, because otherwise the time, we save nothing on time. And then then I guess you need to get in the question of, if we do that, that decision ends up kind of being final. Can you imagine the uproar if we third-partied out and then we came in and changed it around? That it's just going to be.
But how would we?
So we
I
almost
mean,
have to go with their decision. If we lay it out there, guys, we're like, okay, they're going to do it, and we're just basically going to rubber stamp it when it comes through. Because if not, I mean, come on, we're going to, you know.
And the problem I see with that is, how do I feel like the reason it was set up this way is so the commissioners are the ones who are picked, were picked under the amendment, were picked so we make the decision. That's like one of our primary roles, is us. We were all picked by the people who were authorized under the constitutional amendment to pick us. They picked us for a reason. And it feels to me like we should be the ones to make that decision. I'm not a big rubber stamp person. And so, you know,
Well, I'm
to
not
the
a rubber
point-
stamp person either, but we're looking at a time frame of 4 months
Well,
before two of y'all
but
rotate
here's-
off.
But here's the problem. I mean, this is my question: is what's given that we have 203 applications, I realize that, you know, we're only 5 people and we have other jobs, and maybe it goes faster if you've got somebody who's doing it 40 hours a week and they're doing it during daylight hours, and I totally get that. What's a reasonable turnaround time for us to ask for? Like, if you were doing a different kind of procurement that had, you know, I mean, it's 25 pages at minimum, and honestly, they've got to get through all of that. You're talking about a lot of work. What's even a reasonable time period to ask for?
And that's not something I can give you off the top of my head without speaking to anyone else in my office about it. We can try to take on as much of helping you as we can. We can try to take on working with you on the scope of work, or even presenting a scope of work to you that we're recommending. We
Sure.
can do either one of those options for you. Trying to tell you exactly how many man hours or person hours and trying to estimate that.
I'm just saying,
That's
if
difficult.
we were giving it to somebody,
Mhm.
I mean, it seems like you'd have to give them 30 days.
Well,
That would be
you can set
tight
up-
timelines.
You can set up your deadline, and it would depend on how many people were on the team that you were asking for. It would depend on what type of expertise they already had. If they had already done this type of thing in the past, or if they were, had medical degrees or something that would help them in their expertise, then I think that would need to be taken into consideration. But giving you an estimate, I'd feel terrible doing that, because
Well, and honestly, even if even if this is the decision you went with, it would have to be your decision as to really how the timeline goes. You're in the best position to know what you think is reasonable. Now, you may get some responses back where they say this is too tight of a timeline, and you may just, and whoever's deciding on the selection of these contractors could decide to eliminate them if they said it was going to take too long or they didn't comply with the requirement you asked. Or it may be that they come back and say, that's fine, we'll get it done in the 30 days you asked for, but it's going to require a lot more personnel and it's going to make the price go up. I mean, it could
Gotcha.
go several different directions. So it's impossible for us to say 30 days is reasonable.
What's that,
or
what would be an
45.
average cost of getting a cooperative procurement for this,
Oh,
something like
gosh.
this? I mean, that would be
You're
a
asking
big,
an unfair question, probably.
Well, an average is, yeah, no, go ahead.
It's
I
not
know.
a fair question at all. It's just, it's something we can't answer. We haven't had this before, just like you haven't done this before. So it's impossible for us to tell you the number. We can tell you that with with what we've suggested, going with a cooperative and asking for requests for quotes, you would be dealing with a low bid offer.
so if we were to make a rule change for this, will we have to request for funds to cover that as well?
Are the funds
We
approved?
we
I
have,
think the
we have
funds
funds.
are approved.
I think they're saying the funding's there. I guess the question I would have, it all goes back to the timeline. Does, and it's an unfair question on my part, so I'm gonna ask it anyway, because that's just, the question in my mind is, are we gonna have to give them 30 days, or are we gonna have to give them 60 days? And then the question, if we're doing, and this is my lack of procurement knowledge, if we're doing a low bid, right, low cost bid wins, but yet they start coming back and, we can't do it in 30 days, it's gotta be 60 days, or there's a different price on all those sort of things, then do we have any discretion in that, or is it just purely, hey, this person says they can meet 30 days, and if that's the case, if they're the only ones who say it's 30 days and it's $2 million, then that's what we're stuck with.
Do you want to answer?
Yeah, I mean, you can essentially create a requirement for a timeline that if their response does not fall within that, then they're essentially disqualified. So yeah, I mean, yes, sir, you have discretion in stating that this is a tight timeline. and
But
we
it's
have
on the
to-
front end, not on the back end.
Right. So, right, I mean, that would be on the front end, yeah. But you do have discretion in
Sure.
in enforcing that before any entity would be procured.
And procurement would help us figure out maybe because I don't know. I mean, I'd love to
Yes.
say you got to do it in 7 days, but
We would-
that's probably unrealistic.
We would make ourselves available for that, and we would also, like I said, we'd be willing to work with you, or if it would be better for us to come up with something and present it to you, that's also something we can do.
So if you look under the rules, it says the commission may retain consulting services to assist with the verification and scoring. So does that mean that we still have to score them? The word assist, I'm asking about the word assist.
No, I mean, if the rule is written that way to, give you, the commission, the authority to hire someone, but essentially you would be hiring a consultant to come in and do the scoring and present you with the scoring. You would give them the rubric and everything, and they would come back with all of their notes and the final scores.
Speaking of scoring, I want to break on another concern about the scoring. I think when you look back at the winning applications under cultivation, which it made sense, but if you think about the winners, you didn't see anything in Pulaski County or Washington County. The bonus points are what put people over the line. I think there's a lot of people conveniently don't want to understand how the scoring was. We only scored at 90 points. There's not a single one of us in here that scored anybody above 90 for a simple reason that we couldn't. What happened was the people that got over 90s because they had bonus points from the merit. The merit was completely objective, done by ABC, not us.
It was yes or no.
It was yes or no.
Right.
But the multiplier effect here that people should realize is that, for the applicants that thought, well, it's only 2 bonus points, I'll make it up because I have a superior application. It wasn't 2 bonus points. I mean, someone that hit all 10 bonus points, you multiply it times 5. They got a 50-point head start, not a 10-point head start, which I think was great, and that's how we designed it, that's how we did it. You know, you hear all this jargon out there, and people refuse to realize that, oh yeah, we only scored 90 out of the 100 points. The rest of it was autopilot based on what we said. But that also, look at the winners. The bonus points really is what drug people across the line, not his connection to Vladimir Putin, right?
But
I mean,
those things would stay the same if we had a consultant.
But if we only had 1 consultant, then instead of having, let's say you hit all 10 bonus points, you only get a 10-point, the 50 points, it multiplied out more. You see what I'm saying?
It's what you're, I mean, I think that's one thing
On
that
a
we would
total
have to
score.
do in an RFP is effectively keep it the same way. And so you're gonna have 5 different people do it. And, you know, the only way you can even start doing that is to say, this person's kind of working in this area, this person's got expertise here. The concern.
And that's what I meant about keeping the diversity within the reviewers.
And I mean, I think all of us have our natural bents and just natural understandings. I can look at a business plan and some of the I'll say the legal structure and some of that a little bit different than, you know, I don't know what Viagra's medical term is. That's just not my area. But so we naturally have a bent.
Viagra,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
Okay,
Example, though, you know.
let's get back to the point at hand. So the benefit one is time.
Yes.
The other benefits,
Efficiency.
efficiency.
You would have a wider pool to choose from because you would be dealing with a much higher range of consulting firms and people with expertise. Let's see. And so time, efficiency, a wider pool, range of expertise. Those are the 3 things that I think would be most valuable to the committee.
And the cost would be a negative. Of course, it would cost the state, but it would.
Just depends on the analysis that the committee decides
Sure.
to do about whether or not they want to hire the person.
Does it eliminate perceived conflict of interest?
Does it eliminate, I'm sorry?
Perceived.
Well, I think it would give, it would, like I said, it would separate the committee from the decision, and that might, in some minds, say, well, that takes care of some bias or some conflict of interest questions that I had. So that
What-
could be a perceived positive.
You were saying that we could, you know, I wrote down 9804 says conflicts with the state and whatnot.
Yes.
I don't think that's necessarily the place where the conflicts were ever an issue. It's the conflicts of have those people, do they have any connections with? Have they ever worked with? Have they ever been involved with any of the applicants?
Sure.
So at some
is in the
point, we've
scope
got
of
to
work.
actually, I mean, Danny, I don't know. It's probably ABC pull a list of everybody who's involved in a dispensary anywhere and providing that as part of it. Would that be how that would work?
We could. That could be a part of the scope of work, to say that we would like to provide a list of persons and see if there's any conflicts that they can perceive. We could ask for, that's what the scope of work is for, is to try to make sure that all of your concerns are dealt with.
Okay. And when would we, timeline, do we have to, and maybe Danny, you know, I don't know who knows this, do we have to wait until the emergency rules passed to actually put our scope of work out there?
We do, because currently the commission does not have that authority.
Right.
I don't want to jump ahead into our next discussion point too far, but I do want to let all of you know, previously at our last meeting, I had said that there was not an ALC subcommittee meeting scheduled for July. I did speak to VLR this morning. They said that the reason why there's not likely to be a meeting is because there's just nothing on the agenda. However,
There could be.
if
Kinda
there
thing.
could be,
Okay.
they said that the deadline would actually be tomorrow. So if we wanted to get on next Thursday's meeting, I could go ahead, if you voted today that you wanted to adopt this, as of tomorrow, I could work with VLR to get it on a July agenda.
And so when does that make us able to, what's the earliest date we could put out the co-op request?
Next week, the end of next week.
And so in the meantime, we would have to actually come up with our request too. So, I mean, we got to figure out what that time looks like. And then,
I will go ahead and further say that is assuming that it makes it
Yeah, so-
through subcommittee.
Through subcommittee.
That is the assumption there.
So what is the risk of allowing someone else, a consultant, to review the applications and score for us as a state?
It would cost, there would be a cost, which you've said. I believe that the committee members have also stated that they believe in some cases, they would like the committee itself to be more determinative and to have a more local interest with it. So that is something you could perceive as a negative, maybe, is that the more local interests
Would be out, the local interest,
well,
essentially.
you'd still, of course, be writing the scope of work, so you would still have that, you still have that authority and control over it, but that could be a perceived negative.
Can you talk a minute about I know we've talked about consultant or consulting service and how we make sure that is an organization and not a single person who is going to bring forth the expertise to look at these in our rubric that we provide and then give a score based upon that rubric and our rules?
We would look at the different procurement contracts that we already have in place, the different co-op contracts that we already have in place, and look at how they were originated and how they did their vetting process, and match it most closely to what you all would need for your scope of work.
I'm still concerned, there's two forms of bias here. One obviously is they knew someone and blah, blah, blah. The other is the commercial bias of, look, if they refer to some recreational guy out in Oregon, that's going to skew the kind of people that put good medical efforts to keep it truer to what the amendment is. So there's not just the bias of corrupt, there's a bias of just commercial bias that concerns me as well. Again, making sure that we protect our communities from it. But
I will make a note that the types of companies that are on these cooperative contracts are large, generally national, reputable companies, and so they do this sort of thing for a living, in that they, not necessarily medical marijuana, but they are hired as consultants to score all sorts of different work for different governments. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I don't think there's a huge risk of hiring someone who's not reputable and professional and going to conduct themselves as such.
yeah, I think that's the low. I think the commercial bias probably works me is much more than the other. It's just, if they, however they decide to consult with, depending on, quote, which doctor you talk to, you're going to get you can get some real extreme commercial bias on this thing, which makes it different to public safety and public health. I mean, that's another concern I have.
I agree as well. It's just very hard to say yes to a consultant without knowing anything about the consultant. I know we're here just discussing it. I think it's something we should look at. Can you tell us what's available before we make a decision on the type of
What's
consultants
available?
that are available?
The larger consultancies
Yes.
consult firms that I
Do
believe
you know-
Arkansas has dealt with in the past include Deloitte, Public Consulting Group,
Deloitte, how do you spell that?
DELOITTE.
Deloitte, okay.
Yes.
I was just wanting to
Oh,
look
sure.
at them. I don't know anything about them, so, I would want to know something about what was available before I said, yeah, let's go for this, not knowing.
But if we don't make a decision tonight, it puts us back another
Another
30
month.
days to put it in front of the legislature. Is that right? Is it-
Yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a very important decision. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, I know we want to rush, but we have to make the right decision for what we're doing. I mean,
But-
yeah, you can go out and say,
Well, let's ask this, I'm trying to get the timelines just so I understand. If we approve something today, it gets on for next Thursday.
Yes.
And so that's July 19th.
18th.
18th,
Yes.
okay. If that's approved at that point, Isn't it the night, Thursday the 19th? Oh, well, anyway. If that's approved, then it's, how long did you say to get, I mean, and that would also mean we'd have to have a scope of work done somewhere in here, right?
Yes,
And so if we submit it to the co-op, how long does that take again?
30 to 60 days to
So-
have the bids in hand.
So 60 days, let's call that September 19th.
Okay.
That'd be the bids. And then are we gonna have to come back and accept it, or does it just automatically happen and they get everything?
I think according to the rules that were said earlier, there was the committee did have to approve. of
Yeah, the recommendations
So
of
we'd have
finding
to-
any,
Well, of the
of the
consultant.
consultants, yeah. The selection of any consultant shall be conducted pursuant to the procurement laws
Procurement
of the state
So
of
does that just
Arkansas.
mean it would happen automatically? The
Well,
low bid would be
the
accepted?
low bid would be the winner, yes.
And
So automatically, the low bid would be
So it'd
accepted.
happen and they would, nothing starts the next day, but theoretically it starts the next day, right?
Yes.
And if they've got, and so I guess this is where I come back into how long that's, if we say 30 days, I think we have to do 30, I mean, I don't know, I don't guess we have to do anything. I'm worried about the pool of, the pool of people we get to respond. So you've got between 30 and 60 days, that's putting us at November 19th before we would theoretically have, and
Anyone
that's
to
best
look at.
case scenario, no delays, everybody's starting the next day. If you look at the number of applications we did in cultivation, which, if you break down the time we had and the number we had, plus we had Christmas and New Year's and all of that, we would get done if we started now grading the 203 applications, we'd get done at the same time. And then we would have done it, so I don't know that we're saving any time here, and we don't know what we don't know what we don't know.
Here's the one thing I'll remind you, that if you choose to move forward with this today, it doesn't bind the commission to actually moving forward with the procurement process at all. It's just that right
Giving
now,
us the authority.
you don't have the
Okay.
authority to do it if you want to. So, there's no harm
Okay.
in moving forward with this, because you can still say at a later time, no, this is not the route we want to take.
But
This-
when would we say
Say
that?
that, yeah.
And how, I mean,
I
at what
foresee
point?
the commission meeting again in the near future.
Well, I foresee that too. I guess it's the question of, and this is really a commission question, is, let's say we say that, and I would mark up what's drafted to allow us to hire any consultant that we thought we needed to, not necessarily just for dispensaries or just for something, because if we're gonna do a rule change, I think we ought to give us the power to hire somebody else in the future. There are times, I remember in some of our initial meetings, we talked about hiring a consultant, and hey, at that point, there wasn't money.
Yeah.
And, because there would have been things that probably would have been helpful and sped the process up if we had done that. I guess my question is, I have that need and that sense of urgency that the people have voted for this. We need to get something done. It's a lot of work, and I'm not saying it's not, but I'm not afraid of doing the work. And I think if we do the work and get going and start moving, we've at least gone through the process. Now that would still make it to where it would still be us five who are scoring that, because we don't have that rollover period, and I don't know, at some point we've got the rollover period issue anyway. Because if all of a sudden we get from November 19th and they're not done, can't do it, or just we add time, we're gonna roll over into December anyway.
So the benefit of being quick it's quick, but it's not gonna be faster.
Well, that's my problem, is I'm saying quick and faster are relative terms, especially when we don't know what that is.
If we do it ourselves, would we have run the same risk that we ran through with cultivation on getting injunctions against us because of all kinds of lawsuits out there?
Yes, all of the same risks remain.
So it'd be times 8, because we have eight zones. So per zone, if they come up and say, hey, conflicts and all of that kind of
I think the
stuff.
difference, though, is
Speculatively, possibly.
Will that happen with the consultant as well? Could the same situation?
I don't think so. I think that hiring a consultant distances the scoring from the commission, since it is a third party doing the scoring.
But that's only
I
if
also-
we bless exactly what they say, which
I
is
mean,
something I
think
know I have a
that's-
problem.
I don't
with.
really think it was a problem with scoring on the, anyway. I mean, I'm not gonna claim that, because, I mean, not one of us, each one of us, you cannot be less biased than this commission has been. We can't even talk to each other during the review. So I don't think that you can
Yeah,
get,
I agree. And the other thing that kind of irritates me,
So-
that it's like people didn't understand the difference between an investment and a gamble. I mean, there were 84 applications, only 5 of them are going to get it. You have a 6% chance. You have better odds. Take your $100,000 fee, go down to Oaklawn Park, put it on a roulette wheel, put it on red, and you just increase your chances of making money 8-fold, because there's a 48%
Yeah.
chance of winning there. So people entered a casino, not an investment vehicle, and the fact that they didn't realize that, quite frankly, is not our problem. And that they want to make issue of us like, well, a bit like me going back to Oaklawn, well, hey, I don't like the rules of blackjack. I
So-
didn't count to 21 well. I mean, there's some.
so you guys have heard the benefits of procurement, hiring someone, and you've heard the conflicts. And so our next item is essentially discussion of a proposed emergency rule to allow MMC to hire a consultant to assist with the scoring of the dispensary application. Do
Are
y'all
we all-
need to hear anything else from procurement? You have any other questions?
Did that timeline I was outlined, did that seem like that's reasonable?
Yes, and we can ask for a timeline where you have certain deliverables by certain dates and certain milestones that need to be made. We can write all that in.
But even at the best,
30
What-
to 60 days.
yes, just the time
Best
frame you
case
gave.
scenario, we're into
The same.
November, December time frame-ish, assuming everything goes right and we find the right people and everything.
We're putting I'd say the closest we can get it is 30
Sure.
days, and the furthest out we're hoping we could get it done is 60 days.
Okay,
So.
we're in that time period.
We're in that time period.
Okay,
Yes.
that's,
I think mid-September is 60 days, is that correct?
the 60-day, right, 60 days is if we do from July 19th to September 19th, that's 60 days.
Okay.
And then depending on how long they take, you've got, October and November
Right.
19th before it would be back to us. So we're talking, and that's assuming they can make it in that time period, and 2, at some point we've got to write a scope of work, which isn't really calculated in that. That's assuming we're sending out a scope of work to the co-ops on the 19th, which I don't think we're that far down the road yet. And so, that would be my concern. But I don't
Okay.
have any more questions.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so much
Thank
for
you very
coming.
much.
It's a lot to chew on, actually.
Well, when you start putting dates to it, I guess I think of it as, hey, it's being faster, and I'm not sure that in reality that's the case.
So, do we want to put a proposed emergency rule to allow MMC to hire? That's the question on the table. Thank you.
So, I heard Commissioner Story say that, we want to make this rule that gives us the ability for any license. I do agree with that it's not just dispensary. Sure, that's what our focus is today, but I would put a motion forward that we may retain consulting services to assist with the verification and scoring of any application for a license, renewal of license, or transfer of license.
Second.
Are you proposing to keep in or to take out the rest of the language?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we would
he's
keep in
taking out
no,
everything.
No, I would keep
You're just
in
taking out
everything
the
under
word
it.
dispensaries,
Yes.
right?
Yes. If you want me to go through all of that on the record,
No, I just
will.
was making sure that was there.
So that is just a general motion that we would have the ability, but doesn't commit us to actually.
And
That's what
Make
Danny
sense.
said, that it does not commit us into
Just want to clarify.
hiring.
That's what I thought.
It just allows us
It
to.
allows us to. And should we go, in my mind, we almost should go, if we're gonna add a rule, we ought to come one step even back further to say, hey, if the commission wants to hire a consultant for, I don't know, anything, like if we come into the situation like we've talked about, do we need another cultivation facility? Do we need anything, right? Some of the problem we have is there's no data today to say we need a 6 cultivation license. How would we find that out? We would have to, if we wanted to know that today, I would need a consultant or somebody to go try to find,
So how would you word that?
deal with
Danny,
that.
to add something into that?
I think we would want to,
Can we just do a section B? The commission may retain consulting services to assist the commission with any other function of the
honestly,
commission?
I would leave it at the commission may retain consulting services. Period.
That'd be just,
Broad.
That's broad, yeah.
Broadly encompasses everything.
I like
good.
that.
I'm actually better with that than
Yes.
trying to narrow it down and say this is the only thing we can do.
I agree.
Because I think at some point we need to have the conversation, and today may be part of that day, of are we going to have consultants or not? And I think it's timely today because if the answer's not, I think we go and we need to get started on scoring dispensaries. But for purposes of this, I like what Danny's saying. The commission may retain consulting services to assist the commission.
are you
Period.
okay with that? Commissioner?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is that we have an emergency rule, and they are meeting tomorrow. We are hoping that it would pass tomorrow, and the more we open this up, do we complicate the issue for this emergency rule? I'm for that. The question I have is, do we complicate this for the committee to the point where there's more debate, and when we are less likely that this gets passed in committee?
I can't speak to what the committee may or may not say on that. The emergency need for this, though, is the need for a
That's
consultant
right.
on the dispensaries. So the argument would not change.
It'd be the same.
It's the same argument that we need a consultant, and perhaps because like you said, we might need consulting services for other items in the future. It would prevent us from having to come back to them at a later date.
Yeah.
I agree.
So you're saying we need to split them up?
No.
Or
leave
keep
it-
them-
leave it as
Like
just
that.
consultant.
Yeah.
Yes, just with the consultant.
I just think
Make it short.
we say the commission can do a consultant, and that's, in this case, it might be for dispensaries. Sometime down the road, we might have some other need, and I don't know what that can be, but if we needed it at that point, we wouldn't have to go through a rule change, we wouldn't have to do that. That considerably cuts down the period of time it takes to get something going.
I'll second that.
Well, I think
Well, we
can't
already got a
have-
motion
you
on the
can't
floor,
have-
so, yes, so
Yeah.
do you want to,
that's just discussion.
that was discussion.
So we feel pretty confident that it's not going to open up more debate within the committee based upon what we think tomorrow that gives us a chance to succeed.
I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, then I'm okay with backing up and saying that the commission may retain consulting services.
Okay.
And I would like to amend my motion
Thank
to
you.
reflect that.
And I'll second it.
Okay. No further discussion, we'll call for a vote. All in
Should we-
favor?
Should we just say, sorry,
There's further discussion?
there's one,
Okay.
just in the language, may retain consulting services to assist the commission. I mean, is that?
That's fine.
I don't know, is that?
Your lawyer.
It's probably the
That's
same
it,
thing.
yes.
I just,
Is that,
they can, this,
doesn't,
Practically, it makes
okay.
sense.
yeah. I'm
All
good
in
with what you
favor?
said.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the,
So, And just so you're gonna Danny, you're gonna contact BLR tomorrow and ask them to
Yes.
do that part.
Yes.
Perfect.
So item F, confirmation by staff that the cultivation licenses have been awarded pursuant to the MMC rules.
Yes, so on July 10th, Tuesday, the cultivation licenses were issued to the awarded 5 companies: Natural State Medicinals Cultivation, Bold Team LLC, Natural State Wellness Enterprises, Osage Creek Cultivation, and Delta Medical Cannabis Company, Inc.
I have a question on that. There was, and we just hadn't had time to talk because we haven't been able to talk, but there was, obviously all those things that ABC does, and if someone's too close to a church, school, whatever, you just get some guy out there with a roller and you walk it. You find it either is or it isn't. I mean, that's not an opinion, that's just an objective thing. But, some of the applicants we scored, after we scored them, so ABC, they previewed them, and they said these guys all passed the mustard. Then we scored them, but then in hindsight, ABC threw some of them out. And I don't know exactly why, and I don't know if those were winning candidates or not, but I think that if we scored it, there should be an objective way to make sure that if it was too close to a school, then it's too close to a school. It either is or it isn't.
Right.
But I think any of the ones that we scored, and I don't know if there was 1 or 2 that were thrown out, I think there was for sure 1, maybe 2. But if those applicants, how and why ABC went back and decided after they said, hey, these guys all passed the mustard test, now you guys go score them, we scored them, then ABC came back and said, well, this one really didn't pass the mustard test. So is that a confirmed, I mean, we never really got a straight answer. There was like, well, we think it's too close to the other guy.
So
So I want to know.
one of the things on the agenda is to discuss, and I don't know where it's going to fall, to discuss the applications that were disqualified
Okay.
based on the rules in ABC. Am I saying that correct? And if we scored it, that means that it went through the process. It passed everything. So you're asking, Dr. Rahman, you're asking about all the applications that weren't scored.
I'm talking the ones that we scored.
Okay.
The ones that we literally scored, that ABC said here, that I went home and sat at my desk,
And you
missed my
reviewed
kid's
it.
soccer game, and I stayed up drinking and all that stuff. And then we came back and they said, well, this one was disqualified because of something else. Now, they did that in arrears. Now, why did that happen in arrears, and was that a confirmable? I'm just asking for the sake of the ones we scored, the ones that were disqualified after we scored them, exactly why were they disqualified? And, we just hadn't been able to discuss it. So I'm like, we scored it. We all
What was
sat there
it?
and
We all
scored
scored
it.
it.
And
Okay.
so if it was thrown out, if it's legitimate, and again, that's an objective thing. That's not like
Sure.
my opinion, your opinion. And if it doesn't crack the top 5 or 8 or whatever, then I guess it's all irrelevant. It doesn't matter. But I don't know where we never saw
We
the
never-
scores.
we never
So it
discussed
happened to be, it may have been the second best application, but it got hit out on a technicality that we didn't really understand why. And so I want to know, like, how do we confirm that?
Okay, I will point your attention to agenda item I.
Yep.
It addresses scheduling of the next MMC meeting, agenda to include commission review of the decisions to disqualify applicants. If you
All
would
right.
like to hear that at the next meeting, we can do that. We can staff that meeting to address it, or.
It doesn't matter. I just think that I think it's a valid question. I think in fairness to all these people that made an incredible effort to put these applications together, and again, it was a casino, you only got a 6% chance, but if they're disqualified because they're next door to a daycare, then fine. If it's not, then.
Do we know
let's
how many
figure out.
applications that would fall into the category of what Dr. Rahman's asking for?
I believe there was one.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, then that one, I just want clarification. I'm not talking about the ones that we didn't score. I get it. You guys fan those out. Thank you. That was a few cups of coffee we didn't have to drink. But yeah, the one that we actually scored, I would like to know where it landed in the actual scoring, if you added it up. And if it's, if it's number 50, then okay, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. But if it's actually a top-end score, then
Because we have to
confirm us why
decide.
it was or wasn't
Yeah.
confirm to us why, because we scored it, then you guys said, oh, never mind that one. I don't like that. We scored it. I want to know publicly why that was not pursued.
Here's my question to all of you. Do you want this to be staffed and have the actual, because we don't currently, I don't have anything in front of me regarding that. We could prepare a meeting for it.
I would like staff present.
Yeah.
We're just doing our due diligence on.
Do we know, I like Commissioner Roman and Dr. Roman's question. Do you know where it would, that particular one that was removed, where it would have fallen in the order, at least?
So first,
It would have fallen sixth.
Okay.
Would have fallen sixth.
Yes.
Then that
Okay.
might be very relevant based on
I think
other
that's
things.
yes,
So
it's very relevant.
we need to
yeah.
know why we scored it, and then you guys later on just told us that it wasn't a qualified application. I think that's.
And so I think what Danny's saying is that she is going to give us that information.
Okay.
And we have, not just for, we want that information, that's important that we have that information because we didn't know where the application fell, but it's also important that we know where the other ones, why they were disqualified as
Right.
well. It's just a statement. It may have been that they didn't pay their taxes, but, or they worked too close to a church.
Absolutely.
But those are small things that you would have picked up initially.
Yes.
But to have one come all the way through and be scored and not fall in the numbers is a problem. So,
When we do have staff, can we have DFNA present, the ones that looked at all of that?
Yes.
That'd be perfect.
So,
We're gonna do that at the next meeting, though.
so,
It's fine.
yes, they don't have the information.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Based
fine.
on what I understand, Danny doesn't have that
I don't
information.
have it in front of me right now.
Right.
Okay,
I-
perfect.
Confirmation, so that was on ayes.
That was
Thank
aye.
you.
Okay,
Yes.
so I didn't.
That's okay.
Seemed in the same
Thank you.
category of approving.
Yeah, it's all
The stuff.
there.
But we have to have the information too,
Gotcha.
so that we can make a decision.
Correct.
G, confirmation by staff that complaints and protests concerning cultivation licenses holders have been turned over to ABC enforcement for investigation, and if warranted,
Yes, so we have received throughout the process, since the announcement of the 5 licenses, we've received a number of protest letters. I'm sure you guys noticed I've been kind of littering your emails with them here lately. But what we have done is they have all been turned over to ABC enforcement for investigation because the commission does not have a mechanism to hear those protests. They don't have any mechanism to investigate those claims, but ABC enforcement does. The ABC rules say that ABC is charged with any kind of compliance issues or any kind of issues with licensees, whatever kind of issues might come up. If they're not in compliance, if there are issues later discovered with their applications, that jurisdiction lies with ABC. And because ABC has a law enforcement agency, they are able to go out and investigate those. So all those protests have been turned over to ABC enforcement. ABC enforcement will refer whatever findings they do or don't have to the ABC board.
That's great.
How many protest letters are there? Do you know?
Approximately a dozen.
Okay.
wow.
And when you say ABC enforcement, who is ABC enforcement?
The Alcoholic Beverage Control Enforcement, the director is Boyce Hamlet.
Okay. How long does that process take?
I honestly cannot speak for him in that investigation.
So it doesn't stop the 5 individuals or companies that were awarded applications, it's just that they'll check.
Yes,
So it doesn't stop them from proceeding.
no.
Y'all have any? H, discussion of proposed emergency rule to amend existing rules concerning the extension of cultivation and dispensary applications, the awarding of additional replacement license, and the MMC option to rely on the existing applications and scores to fulfill those licenses for a specified period of time. That's a lot of words. And just, we don't want to just one-chance application scores.
So what we have, I included the actual areas with the rule changes, and it should be marked H.
Okay.
And if you flip to the second page, there's two little stapled packets in H, and each one on the second page, the underlined language is the new language. Anything crossed out would be removed, but the majority of it is added language. And this language,
And 14, which am on the right?
Yes.
So, it starts,
This H.
yeah.
oh, sorry, I meant.
Little H there.
Oh,
Actual,
It's purple.
now I see it.
my purple.
Okay.
So it's G,
So,
section G
yes.
is in girl.
And before I kind of walk you through both these, they reflect that they're pretty much identical in the language, except for that one applies to cultivation and one applies to dispensaries. But in section G on the cultivation, it's a rule edit that says, however, the commission shall have the option to maintain the list of reserved applications for 24 months from the issuance date of the initial licenses in any application period. So essentially, what that would do is it gives the commission the option, if they want, to go ahead and hold the existing applications with their scores. And you can hold them for up to 24 months, which puts you in a position that if, for whatever reason, like Commissioner Story had said, down the line, the commission determines a need for more cultivation licenses. If somebody were to surrender a license, if something were to happen that somebody has a license revoked, the way the rules currently stand, you would have to go through this process again. We would have to solicit bids from the public and then score all over again. This would give the commission the option to just move on to the next highest score, the runner-ups.
Man, we'd save someone a
Oh.
major, it may be 24 months down the road. I will not be here, but, I mean, you're gonna save a lot of money, a lot of headaches. We've already done the heavy lifting. I think that's I don't know who came up with that one, but that's a great idea in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer.
I like it.
So we don't have to discuss that very,
No, I just
very,
think
very
that's
long.
that's a slam dunk.
That's
I mean,
very,
it-
very
Nick, we're
important.
sure- Yeah,
You
that's.
need to make a
But we
motion.
are at that, I guess here's the question I have is, at that point, we're foreclosing any new we wouldn't
Right.
put it out for new applications. We're basically saying, hey, nobody's gonna be able to apply again
Until that 24.
for 24 months.
Right.
Right.
It's just next in line.
It's just next in line.
So kind of the only question I guess I have is, we had talked about if we saw a need in, there, based on where like the dispensaries go to. Remember, we had talked about what if we said, hey, there needs to be, for diversity purposes, something over here, but yet the next in line or whatever is not where we want to put it, then are we hamstrung?
I think the bonus point thing worked. I mean, if you look at who won, I think the bonus points took care of that. I mean, it'd be a concern if we had 3 of them in Pulaski County, but when you really look.
Well, I guess I'm
how-
thinking more dispensaries, which haven't been
Well,
done yet,
dispensaries.
because we're really, in that context of what we had talked about in previous meetings, we were saying, hey, we're doing, 4 per zone, but what happens in Zone 7, right? Like
I see what you're saying.
eastern part of Arkansas, if we say Zone 7 includes these 4 that are already here, but really we're saying, and I don't know exactly what county it'd be, but there's a county that's saying, all of Zone 7 is in one county, and we're going, hey,
But it
that
would-
puts it down here.
But you can make the rules so it's based on qualified applicant. I mean,
Grab-
there's no one
grab-
available in Zone
Grab the highest
7.
ranking one in
Yeah.
that county
Right, but we're
and give it to them. And that way, look, you're gonna save a ton of money. ton of headaches for people. I mean, this is,
Well, in your argument, what if one of these counties vote themselves dry? You know, are we going to have to come in and redo it? Or,
But that's my question, is one of them comes in, they say, this particular county in the zone says we're dry, so to speak, right?
Or
Then
city,
the
or-
next one, but what happens when the next one on the list that we're supposed to take is also in that county?
just
Yeah,
keep
the
going.
next one.
You keep
Till
going
you
to
find
the
the one
next
that,
one.
till you find the one that fits the bill. I mean, I
And
think
if it doesn't fit, then can you open up application if you don't have one that fits?
Well, so right,
Can I make a point?
Yes.
Sorry.
Mhm.
This
Sure.
is just for 24 months.
I know.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
But the
Sure.
question came up, I know.
Right, so, I mean, in putting in perspective, 24 months, you probably won't have any until 6 months at the earliest. You gotta figure out where
Sure.
the need is. So that's why it's not longer than 24 months, and it's longer than a year, but it's the time range.
Well,
that
it's gotta
fits
be,
where
if we're gonna do it, it's gotta be longer than a year, because as we've seen, a year can go by really, really quickly without us having any data to know anything, so.
A year's almost here.
Yeah, I think that's not the question. The question is, if we do that, how do I know it goes to another person, or it's kind of like deciding to do that then just says this is what's going to happen. That's the argument. I don't know. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I'm just saying those are my concerns on the language with how we handle that part.
We need to make a
The
motion on-
only thing you can add is that if it wasn't a qualified application, or if it did not meet the needs, that we could open up for requests after that.
Well, and I don't know if we.
I mean, if you
That
have no
thing gets-
applications in Zone 7, and you
Well,
need
sure.
one in Zone 7, how else are you gonna get the application if
Well,
there's no one
I
on
think
the?
I think that's obviously an issue is how do we,
This G states that we shall have the option to maintain the list of reserve applications. That's all that it's stating.
sure.
And sorry, I keep jumping in here.
That's okay, Mary Rob.
Sorry. That is mirrored language in the dispensaries. So
Right.
if you're looking at cultivation, if you look at the dispensary language.
Yeah, I've got that too.
in the draft, it breaks it by zone. So
Mhm.
you would hold all the zone 7
Separate.
applications.
Mhm.
Right.
You hold all the zone 6, all the zone 5, so you're not in a situation where you lose one in 7 and you don't have any left in 7.
Right.
If
Right.
you do, you're not gonna have to pull from somewhere else.
Sure.
So when it breaks down into dispensaries, you've got a reserve in each one of the zones.
But the question is, what if you don't have a reserve?
Well, if you don't, yeah, I think you could hold a special application
That's
period
what
for
I'm-
that zone.
That's what I'm suggesting.
You would, I mean, yeah, because there wouldn't be anybody to come next. to
That's
you.
all I'm suggesting. If there was not a qualified applicant
Yes.
in that area, how do we add that we can
And I
request?
guess,
Then we would open
the
it up.
process.
Yes,
Yeah.
at that point, we open the
and
process.
how would we know if they still, these applications are based on, hey, we're gonna be in this location, we're gonna be this, everything. I mean, is that then, we've gotta go back to the next one and say, hey, is everything still the same? And
Yeah.
what do we do in the situation if they come back and they say, yeah, the place we were gonna lease or buy or whatever, we didn't do that, so now that's where I see an issue of,
I think if they're not
Well, if I was an
qualified,
applicant
keep
and
moving.
I still was possibly open for 24 months, I'd try to keep things the same.
well, I
We
mean,
just keep
but if,
moving down the list.
if
But
they
if you
didn't,
don't,
we
you-
would have to move on.
Right, we'd
But-
have to move
but
on.
But it's only
that's-
for 2 years, and
Yeah.
we're still 6 months away from the growers even building a building. Then we're 6 months away from them even getting product. Ballpark.
And I guess what I'm looking at is when we do a rule change, we're not just talking about this 2-year period. We're also talking about it being held in reserves 6 years down the line for 2 years and what that looks like.
I say this cautiously because I have argued earlier, we should make rule changes to accommodate future needs or anticipated future needs. But I think right now we're talking about possible things that may never arise, and it's hard to try to guess
Mhm.
at that with rules. And it is not impossible to come back in a
Sure.
year or
Make
2
another
years or
rule.
however
Sure.
many years and make some edits to the rules.
Might extend it in 24 months and say, hey, we'll keep them on the tap. But I move we accept this change of the rules.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Call for a vote? Aye.
Aye.
No.
So the next thing is, so that passes?
Yes.
That will
That passes.
Scheduling, you have a comment?
Yeah, real quick, we forgot to add something with the tie. Did we ever figure that that's in the rules? Because my understanding was a tie went to a lottery.
Yes. Well, okay, yes. No, it is not in the rules. Yes, I have something.
Paper, scissors, rock it out.
Okay, so it is going to be section I on this page 14 I just passed out. At some point, I'm not sure how long ago, there was talk in a commission meeting of a tiebreaker. So, to revisit that, we have here a draft for you, if you would also be interested in this, which states, in the event that there is a tie in scoring among applicants, the following procedure shall be followed. Applicants with identical scores shall draw a number between 1 and a number equal to the number of applicants with the identical score. Applicants will then repeat the drawing of numbers in the order determined by the first drawing. The tied applicants will be ranked according to the number pulled from the second drawing. The applicant who draws the number 1 will have the highest rank among the tied applicants. So essentially, it is a double-blind lottery to break any tie.
I think I know we've discussed this, and I
We've
thought it
talked
was in the
about
rules,
Yeah.
but it's not. Do we need to vote on it?
Yes.
I make a motion that if there's a tie, we do the double blind lottery.
Second.
Yeah.
Any discussion?
I'm pretty sure. And is this from one of our drafts? I mean, I know we had this in
We
draft
discussed
rules
it, yeah.
before.
At
Isn't
some
that
point-
in
Yeah.
this the same thing?
Yes, but it's
It's not in the rule.
not.
Yeah, it's not in the rules. And we pulled it out. I remember having it in there and pulling it out, but it's the same language we had in there previously.
Yes,
Okay.
more or less, yes.
Okay.
Sorry
Call,
about that.
you call for a vote?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So, the next, we need to get a date for the, next meeting to discuss, and review the discussion of the disqualified applications as well, I guess. Now, will we have the information from,
Yes, I will provide any information and make available.
do you need, like, time, or you already have it, or you just don't have it available today?
I don't have it available today, and I don't have it available enough that I could walk into my office and pick it up. off my
No, that's
desk,
why I'm asking,
but
what time do you need? I mean,
I'm at your disposal.
When did you say the rules committee meets? You said it's Thursday?
they
Said
meet
It might be Wednesday, I might have misspoken.
the 18th?
Okay.
I mean,
The 18th is
the
the day.
18th.
Okay.
So the next, are
I'm-
Thursdays?
Yeah,
Are you
I'm out
done?
out
Thursday
next.
is not.
No,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm out next week too.
So,
Thursday.
the 23rd is, that won't work.
That won't work for me. 23rd, 24th.
Yeah, 24th. The 25th or the 26th,
What day? of the
Wednesday
week?
and Thursday.
I could do either one.
Thursday would be better for me.
Thursday'd be fine for me.
Thursday, probably.
The 26th.
26th.
Would be better for me.
Wednesday, me too.
I can do Wednesday.
Can you guys do Wednesday?
Yeah, I can do Wednesday. I'll be
Thursday.
cool.
Can you do Wednesday?
I'll just
Yeah.
come back Tuesday.
You could do Wednesday.
Yeah, I'll do Wednesday. As long as it's late in the afternoon.
4 o'clock though, I need it.
It
I
has
need
to
that
be
4
like
o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Yeah.
So Wednesday, July 25th at 4 o'clock. Is there any
No.
other business?
Well, I had said earlier, I think we ought to have that discussion about, I know we're asking for the rule change, which I think we ought to do, but I think the question comes down to, we ought to at least talk about if we're gonna do it or not, because if we're not, I think we ought to start
Yeah.
scoring at least zone 1, because I know we've already got zone 1, it's already redacted.
And how many weeks do we have before you guys rotate off? It's 16, 17 weeks, and then we've got 203 applications, so you're looking at, what, 12, 13 a week?
You're looking at 8 zones.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm
So
talking
you
about
gotta
total.
look at, what the timeline is for each zone. There's 8 of them.
But the number of applications aren't the same for each zone.
Right.
So the time is gonna be different.
Right, well, but it took us 16 weeks to do 83.
It took,
and-
but that was like very hard.
It wasn't fun.
I mean, that was very difficult.
Mhm.
It's twice as many. I'm just not,
Right.
I'm talking about like almost every night to 4 a.m. reviewing applications. So,
I come on, just, if we do that, I can score a zone 4 and whoever comes on can just pick
Well, and
up-
I guess that's
start
kind
scoring.
of,
It's not that big a deal.
we're kind of we're kind of making these assumptions, even like by doing what we did, carrying over applications. It's, everybody's kind of having to deal with, they get the commissioners that are active at the time. So it makes sense to me to say, hey, if we got through 6 zones, then zone 7 and 8 would have new commissioners that would have to score those, and you might have a pause.
Of course, if they know they got
But-
to score, they probably won't come. They'll be like, no commissioners, but.
I
it's,
think we're gonna have to wait till we hear. I mean,
I would,
It's-
I would strongly discourage the commission from having separate commission members score the same application period. I think that is
Yeah.
a serious concern. But we can prepare this, our office can prepare the scope of work for you all next week. I think, is that reasonable?
I think we can work with procurement and get something for you guys to review at your next meeting in terms of the scope of work. We'll know by then whether or not the rule has passed the executive subcommittee, and you can have some idea of what you would be looking at if you wanted to see how.
so if it doesn't pass, we would just have to go forward and review them.
If it doesn't
So it may not,
pass,
may
right.
not pass.
We'll know that next week.
Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
I think we should decide it today, but I'll let the.
I mean, you want to start reviewing the applications.
If we're gonna do it, I think we start today, and if we wait 2 weeks to decide what we're gonna do, we're 2 weeks down the road.
Don't you still have zone 1?
I still have zone 1.
I actually got half,
And-
maybe, I have a lot of zone 1 done. I just quit when they were like, oh, stop.
When they told you to stop,
Yeah,
but
like,
yeah.
oh, okay.
And
Uh,
I guess it's
but-
just that thing of saying, I think there's ways to deal with us doing it. If we want to put in a recusal process, we put in a recusal process. If we want to go down the way we did it last time, which is what I think we ought to do, I think we go do it. And I think we start scoring them, and waiting 2 weeks is 2 weeks down the road. It's the difference between having, right now, before anybody would rotate off, there's 22 weeks. So,
I may start scoring. I hadn't looked in a while, but I know I've scored a lot of them. I was pretty close to getting it. I may just start back just in case, just to pace
Well, I mean,
myself.
but I think we can only move as fast as all of us can move.
Right.
So if you say, okay, you're gonna start and I start or whatever.
I mean, we had
it leaves
deadlines
it-
before.
Right, it
And
leaves
so,
everybody else kind of, I think
Oh,
we've gotta
yeah.
make the decision.
Are we gonna read them?
Are we gonna do it or are we not gonna do it?
Well, let's hear the procurement thing, and I think I gotta be sold on that a little bit more, that, that the things we discussed.
But the question on the table is, are we gonna be scoring until we hear that decision? And that's something that we
I
have
think
to
we
decide
should.
on here.
And I guess I'd put a motion out that the commission restarts scoring of Zone 1. If we decide we want to back off of that and stop later, we can always do that. But I'm willing to start, and I would say we go down that road.
I think we've asked for this emergency rule, and now, but we have to proceed as if we
Right.
don't have the rule.
I mean, the people are waiting, and
Well,
I can get through a lot.
There's a motion on the table. Do we have a second? Did you anyone second it?
I'll second it. I mean, like I said, I
Okay.
got through half of them already. I'll just start picking away at it. And we'll just, if it's all for naught, I did half of it for naught, so
Okay.
it doesn't bother me.
Any further, do you have any discussion on it?
We're asking for an emergency rule. I think it's in the best interest. So I would say we move forward with getting that rule prepared, looking at a draft, doing that as expeditiously as possible
Without reviewing the applicant?
without reviewing.
No other discussion? Okay. All, let's vote?
Aye.
No.
No.
No. What's your,
No.
You said no.
No.
okay.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. So we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, yeah.